Hi guys, I want to talk to you today about the sine of an angle. Right, well, if I was to call this angle x, then the sine of x is the answer to the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. The opposite being the one that's on the opposite side of the triangle and the hypotenuse being the longest side of the triangle. And again, we're looking at right angle triangles. Now it turns out that this is consistent. If the angle is 30 degrees, then this answer to the opposite divided by the hypotenuse will always come out to the same thing. So, for example, if I do sine of 30, so sine of 30 is equal to a half. That means that opposite divided by the hypotenuse for any triangle with 30 degrees would equal a half. So an example of that could be 30 degrees, 3 and 6, because 3 divided by 6 is a half. And it's almost like an equivalent fraction there. Now we can use that to work out sides that we don't know. So for example, if I had 30 degrees there and this was, what should we say, 5, and I wanted to work out what was here, I can say, right, that's my hypotenuse and that's my opposite, and I'm going to use an algebra triangle to help me work things out. You've seen these sorts of things in all sorts of areas of maths and science. Now, so I want to find out the opposite. So I'm going to cover that over and I'm going to say y equals. And then because these two are on the same line, I'm going to times them together. So it's sine 30 times 5, and that comes to 2.5. Now, sine 30 is a particularly nice one. Mostly they don't work out as nice as that. So let's have a look at a different one. And then, so I've got 20 degrees here. And let's say that is 6. And that is M, we'll call that. So I'll do my algebra triangle. We'll always start off with that. We've drawn it a bit big this time. So again, there's my hypotenuse. This is my opposite, so I'm going to cover over my opposite and I'm going to times. So M is equal to S, which is sine 20, times H, which is 6. Sine 20 times 6 is equal to 2.05. Three significant figures. Like I say, it's only sine of 30 that really comes out as a nice answer. Everything else is horrid. So with these two, I found out the opposite. I think it's worth us looking at what would happen if I needed to find out the hypotenuse. A bit long there. Doing a right angle triangle. Let's say this is 18 degrees. That is 9 centimeters. And this is what I'm finding. Let's call it Z this time. So first job is to pick out that I know that's the opposite and I know that's the hypotenuse. I'll draw my algebra triangle SOH. This time I'm finding H. So because this is over the top of that, that's a divide. So we've got H, which is Z, is equal to O, which is 9, divided by sine 18, which is equal to 9 divided by sine 18, 29.1 centimetres to 3 significant figures. So we know, just to recap, that if we have an angle, the sine of that angle is the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. That's what it's defined as. But that answer to the opposite divided by the hypotenuse is the same regardless of how big this right angle triangle is, if that angle is the same. So for 30 degrees, if I had a triangle this big, the opposite divided by hypotenuse would be the same as if I had a triangle that big. It would always come out the same. So I chose an example, 3 and 6 and 30, 3 divided by 6 is a half, sine 30 is a half. So that really tells us what a sine is, opposite divided by a hypotenuse. And then I'm moving on to using that fact to help us to work out bits and bobs. So if I needed to work out an opposite, I would know that my sine 30 would be consistent all of the time, and it's always the opposite divided by the hypotenuse. So this here I've translated into an algebra triangle to help me just rearrange it. So my opposite, which I'm finding out, is on a different level to sine and the hypotenuse. So sine 30 times 5 will give us my answer to what my opposite is. And then this one, the opposite again is what I'm finding out. That's at the top. So these are on the same level. So I would times, so sine 20 times the 6 would give me it's 2.05. But on this one, I mixed it up a bit and said, right, okay, let's find the hypotenuse. So in my algebra triangle, I found the hypotenuse, covered over the hypotenuse, so it's opposite divided by the sine. So Z is 9 divided by sine 18, which gives me that 3 significant figures. Remember, if you're not asked for a degree of accuracy, 3 significant figures is always the way to go. And I want you to realise that sine is not a thing on its own. Sine is a property of the angle. So we have to have sine and an angle together. They can't be separated. So sine 30 is one thing. Again, sine 30 one thing, sine 20 one thing. Sine is nothing on its own. It is a property of the angle that it's attached to. And that's important to realise. Okay?